Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us today for one of our mind fitness sessions this year on the theme of growing your own mindset toolkit. We're together to talk about the subject of anxiety this time, and how we can overcome that and the negative mental chatter that kind of appears in our brains. It certainly appears in mine. In advance of this webinar, we saw the numbers going up on Eventbrite, and I had that kind of anxious feeling about whether Zoom would cope and whether technology would work. Let's hope it does. But anxiety comes in different forms and can mean different things to different people. So we're going to explore that topic today. I'm Jenny Pelling. If you haven't met me before, I'm the Director of Apprenticeship Development and Diversity at Kaplan, with a particular focus on mental health and our well-being and personal development. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Ross McWilliam, who is a mental health first aid trainer and expert speaker, author, coach, broadcaster, and much, much more. And on the next slide, we'll just have a quick focus, Ross, on Mental Health Awareness Week, which runs until Sunday. So a really good time for us to think about this topic, because anxiety is the focus of Mental Health Awareness Week this year. Ross, can I hand over to you?
Thank you. Did I notice, thanks for the introduction, did I notice somebody's got a hand up somewhere, wanted some attention? If it's mental health, I want to make sure everybody's catered for. As you're looking for that, Jenny, I'll press on with the agenda, and then if you deal with that for me.
Will do. Do you put something in the chat or in Q&A for me if you need any help?
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, let's keep you safe and engaged. So things like we're doing now, being receptive to what's happening, being in touch with what your needs are. And, if there's anything you feel that's uncomfortable today, tell us or come off the screen and just relax a little bit. We don't want anxiety, the irony of anxiety, to make you more anxious. So, and we've got some links at the end of the presentation today that can give you some more guidance and signposting as well. We'll actually look at the juxtaposition that stress and anxiety can be good for us. That's difficult to take on board, isn't it? But we're going to look at that. We'll understand very briefly how our brain works and how it goes into automatic mode when we see that fight or flight or freeze scenario present itself. Then we'll start looking at your mental chatter, recognizing it, playing with it, looking at ways we can enhance it to make it positive for you. And this is where we come on to strategies. And again, Jenny and I had a conversation about strategies before, didn't we, Jenny?
Yeah, I was wondering here, Ross, whether we think about strategies and frameworks, and everybody loves a framework and a strategy, but perhaps we can talk about the benefit of being vulnerable and talking to other people and your kind of network as well as support around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Strategies are often seen by many people as the go-to solution, this fixing solution. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but I think if you have the premise that to say, okay, we're going to talk about strategies today, but I want you to think about what's going to make those strategies more effective. And some of the things that makes them more effective is simply having someone to talk to share to be vulnerable with. Now, I was reading the paper this morning about Simon Cowell, who goes to a counsellor once a week for an hour. And he said, the only downside of that is I wish I'd started it 20 years ago, he said. And it's just good for the brain to have a workout, a mind workout, this mind fitness that Jenny and I talk about. So we might not be Simon Cowell, we might not have access to counsellors, but we can have people in our lives who can let us talk to them and listen to us. And often then that makes the strategies more effective because we've got that go-to person as well. I'll talk a bit more about this wraparound aspect as well. Okay, I think we've got 153 on, which might be a record, Jenny, I don't know. Let's press on then. The anxiety monster, you see this monster and it's anxiety. And I'm going to just ask anybody, when you talk about anxiety or see an image like this, write a one word that comes into your mind in the chat box now. When I see anxiety, I get frustrated, or what is it that happens to you? Just put in the chat box when we talk about anxiety. Do you feel guilt? Do you feel shame? Do you feel that sort of body heat rising? Not again from past memories. What about you, Jenny? When I say anxiety to you, what do you think about?
I think about, heart palpitations, worry, overthinking, my mind racing and not being able to sleep,
Yeah.
probably. That's more than
Yeah.
one word, Ross.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but yeah. It's in anything from the chat box anywhere?
Lots of people talking about feeling tense, overthinking, um, fear, worry, insomnia, quite common themes, being
Yeah.
overwhelmed, nausea, panic attacks. So a range here.
And it's interesting, isn't it? I haven't seen them all, but I'm guessing most of those are negative. Are there any positive ones there?
Not so far. Scanning through, overthinking,
Yeah.
heart rate.
And that's an interesting start, isn't it? Because we often associate anxiety with a negativity. But if I press on to the next slide, what if I tell you that some anxiety and stress is good for us? It can help us perform better. So just play with that for a second. We do need anxiety and stress. And the difference between the two is that stress is something that's immediate, that's on us, and we feel it. Where anxiety is a worry about something that may or may not happen in the future. So anxiety is something in the future. And often that takes away the happiness of today almost. So that's the difference between the two. But often we'd say we're stressed because it's more user-friendly than saying I'm anxious. When you say you're anxious, people think there's something wrong with you. When you see the stressed, oh, yeah, I get that as well. So there's a difference between the terms there. But I think, if you're talking about anxiety today, some anxiety is good for us. It can be a supportive friend or that monster that wants to take over, that when I said that word, it took over for some people then. And I do believe if you can reset that mind to think, okay, this anxiety now, it's an opportunity. And I'll give you a very simple example. Like Jenny was thinking this morning and worrying about the presentation, I was trying to sort out my broadband contract. And I spent 30 minutes doing it, getting more and more frustrated, and they doubled the price. And then I thought, you know what, I've tried to do it. I'm just going to cut the conversation now and get a friend to support me on this. And he's going to do it for me later on today and we'll get it sorted. So I'm not running away from it. I tried to do it. Then I thought I'll be regimental and think about a solution to this. So your role is to tame the anxiety monster and to use it to your advantage. Okay, when you feel that those words, that tense, that heat, that fear coming on board, recognize that and let's do something strategic about it. And I think that's the key word, being strategic. So the guy invented the word stress, the 1936, okay, Dr. Hans Selye, and he said stress is good for us. It's the frequency, intensity, and duration of stress over time that can really wobble us. So if we get too much of it too often for too long, it can really hurt us. And what happens when we get stressed, we get the adrenaline and cortisol, these chemicals that are produced from the kidneys that go to the brain, and they're coming to help us to perform. But if we get them too fast, too quick for too long, then it can destroy us. And there's two researchers here, Dr. Ali Akram and Dr. Kelly McGonigal, and they believe that stress helps us perform better in life. And because of that, that logical, strategic approach to it, using anxiety, can actually help us live longer because we're not going out of control like a runaway train. We're thinking, okay, I've been asked to perform. I'm going to perform. I'm going to do it this way. And that helps our body feel in that position of being in control. And
Yeah,
so don't be, go on,
interesting
Jenny.
point there. We've had a couple of comments that reflect that in the chat around how, really good comment from Sasha about how it can stop procrastination. It can actually give you some motivation, incentive, and drive, or it can
Yeah.
be good, but when it turns to anxiety, it becomes bad. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the good thing about deadlines for exams. When the deadline's there, you've got to produce it. Where it's a thesis or a master's, there's a never-ending deadline, which is not a good thing. So a deadline could actually help. So don't be scared of stress and anxiety. Embrace it. You don't have to love it, but just put your arm around it. This is an opportunity rather than a full frontal threat. Okay, so that's the first standpoint when I deal with anxiety. Okay. So in our brains, I talked briefly about the chemicals cortisol and adrenaline. And if you look on the one left-hand side, when we get stressed, it comes from the adrenal glands in the kidney, the adrenaline, and the body detects a threat, a fight or fight syndrome, or we might even freeze. And within milliseconds, and there's a signal sent up to the part of the brain that deals with this response. And if we get a lot of adrenaline being produced, it can flood the amygdala out in the brain. And we call this an amygdala hijack. And it happens, you know, in milliseconds. And all of a sudden, you feel that threat coming on board, you feel that heat, and all of a sudden, if it's an extreme case, people can't remember the names. People start getting flustered. People start catastrophizing. Oh my God, not again. I can't do this. And where are we going with this? And it stops us thinking, stops us processing, stops us remembering. And the hippocampus on the same diagram there, that is linked very closely to the amygdala. And the hippocampus is to do with memory and motivation. So if we've got a lot of these chemicals causing adrenaline in our brains and we're fretting about things, our memory and motivation is going to be affected. So therefore, that's where we forget things. Yeah. So on the other diagram on the right-hand side, this emotional brain, this limbic system in the middle, is where it's all happening. But if we want to perform better in life, we can't let that control us, because the outer neocortex and the prefrontal cortex, the front of our brain there, that's where we make logical and rational decisions. And that's to do with sports, music, drama, exams. That's where the decision and processing happens. It doesn't happen in the limbic system. That's our emotions and memory. So we've got to free that up. And the only way we can free that up is not letting that adrenaline and cortisol come and rush in that middle brain and stop the prefrontal cortex working. And this is where strategies are important. This is where supportive friends are. This identity in life where you are, and to recognize what's happening to you. Okay. So that's some of the theory there for you. Let's just go on to another concept, mental chatter. Some people think I'm naturally nervous, or I'm not like somebody else. This comparison of other people to yourself. So who wants to go for this one? The number of thoughts per day we are having. Let's just take one at a time. How many thoughts a day are we having? Okay. Anybody have a guess for that? Write it in, shout them out to me, Jenny. If anybody gets it.
300,000, 60,000, 30,000, 1,000.
Okay.
All right.
One answer to those is right. Let's go for the answer. It's 60,000. Okay. 60,000. I had about 5 thinking about that then. So 60,000 sounds a lot, but we're working often on subconscious levels. This is where anxiety gets fueled, because we don't know we're anxious, but the body's doing something. We're thinking about it subconsciously. Okay, the number of thoughts per minute we're having. So who's good at maths? That'd be an easy one to work out for some of these accountants, surely. Anybody wants to be brave enough?
62.
Okay, I'm going to put them in a second or two. Here we go.
Lots of people saying 42.
40 is good. I'll take 42. I'll have that. We're sharp people in the building today, aren't we? So 40 thoughts per minute. Yeah, that's amazing. You know, just less than 1 a second. So a little bit more than 1 a second, isn't it? Yeah, a bit less than, sorry. Right, the percentage of our thoughts that are negative or repetitive. Okay, that's a difficult one. 8%. Okay, that's going around in circles, And this will need to break that negative cycle of mental chatter, negative mental chatter, because it just wears you out, it tires you out. But that's what the brain does sometimes. The number of different emotions we can feel. Okay, and we've got different senses, but what are the emotions, our thought processes? Anybody have a guess to that one?
50, 30, all of them.
840 plus.
Wow.
Different types of emotion. Don't ask me to say what they are, but it's a complex brain. That we talked about the brain on the last slide there, but about these emotions, getting on towards 1,000 emotions we can feel. Okay, so we're complex people. We have 60,000 thoughts a day, 40 a minute. Most of these are negative. Okay, so that's what we're working with. So don't take it personally. That's just how the human mind and species has developed. So that's the second thought I'm going to give you, that, you know, don't take this responsibility directly on your shoulders, but we can train ourselves. Okay, so let's just do a little straw poll now. Negative mental chatter. When I say negative mental chatter, what is it that the brain at the moment, is it really going crazy and it's going out of control? I can't do this and I can't finish this course today and I can't do that. If it's up there, that's towards a 10. If it's nice and chilled, yeah, and you're in control and you feel nice and relaxed, it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3. Okay, Jenny, how do you feel at the moment? What score do you give yourself?
I'm feeling pretty good now that the technology's worked. So I'm on a 3 or a 2.
Yeah, I think I'm about a 2, maybe a 1. I don't know. It's all a trend in its tracks now. It's all growing.
Yeah, very good comment that it depends on the day. I totally agree with that.
Absolutely. Time of day, the day,
Situation.
you know, part of your life, um, weather, friends, incidents before, things afterwards. And it's about decompartmentalizing things, and really not taking everything. I think you said, Jenny, somebody else there about catastrophizing everything. I think it's about, putting it in boxes. Okay, we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation to see what that score is, see if it's changed. This is a book that I read probably about 10 years ago, and it's about acceptance commitment therapy. Some people call it theory. And a guy called Russ Harris. And he talks about developing confidence, but also that fear of not being totally on top of us. So we've got eventually, once we can push it away, we get the freedom to be our best possible version of ourselves. So he talks about these stages. When something negative comes into our head, recognize it and accept it. I know sometimes people say, just ignore it, just ignore it. But as soon as you say, just ignore it, it becomes the elephant in the room. So again, we use this in sports psychology a lot these days. Rather than ignore the problem, let's just say, I see it. I can recognize it. I accept it. Give this process a name. That you have this quite a bit often. So I'm going through that performance stage. I'm going through that. I'm on the spotlight stage. Whatever it is, just give it a name. Stay with it. Don't be in a rush to ignore it, to push it away. Just be comfortable with that thought. Yeah. As I was doing with broadband this morning. You know what? I'm going to give it half an hour. I'm going to stay with it. I'm not going to get too upset. I was getting a little bit, but I thought I've got a backup plan here. Show the door to the thought. When you stay with it enough times, okay, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to hijack me, trying to make me go into all those bad things that I used to do in the past. I'm not going to do it anymore. There's the door. Please go out of the door. Give this new state, your state now, a new name. Okay, so keep with me with this. So that thought comes in, recognize it, accept it, give that a name, stay with it. I've had enough of this, show it the door. This is the new state, level 2 now. Yeah. If the thought persists, keep with it, tire it out. Take on a guided tour of your house or an imaginary train journey or bus journey somewhere. Just stay with it for a bit longer, okay, and then say goodbye as it leaves the tour. You've had a longer extended tour, but it's the end of the bus now. It's the end of the terminus. Get off the bus. So what you try and do, articulate mentally what's happening. At the same time, your cortisol and adrenaline, if you're with this thought and not getting scared by it, they're going to reduce down. If they're going to reduce down, your prefrontal cortex will be more logical and easier to use. So everything works for you. Okay. And give it a new name. Okay, let's move on a bit. You might have seen some of these nostril breathing, where people breathe through one nostril, then breathe out through the other one. There's an aspect of distraction here, but it's to slow things down. So if you can do it for at least 5 seconds, you're distracting yourself, but also the oxygen that's coming to our bodies is helping to stop this frightened state getting a grip on us, okay? And it's sort of slowing down or even neutralizing these negative thoughts and this chemistry in our body as well. So often this breathing, whatever form it takes, is a good way to set ourselves. This is one I picked up recently, and if you're, say, ever outdoors, and you lie in the grass and look at the clouds, and you can think that life's upon you and all the clouds are on top of you and you can't move. But if you stay with it long enough, the clouds will move and you'll find gaps and opportunities. And you can relate those gaps and opportunities to your particular life. So it's about staying with it till it moves. And it always does move. So you can breathe in and watch and wait and visualize the gap. Okay, I didn't do a good in that presentation, but there's another opportunity, there's another gap. I'm going to do better next time. Whatever it is you're thinking about, visualizing when those gaps appear, that's when you take opportunities. Yeah, and I like that one. Mindful emptiness. So imagine this one's got a nice road down, trees on either side, looking towards a nice distance and just walking down that road in your mind. okay, it's going down, it's a nice day, the body's fine, the weather's good, I'm feeling better and better, and just getting a bit of momentum going with this. Put yourself in that good state. Yeah. So that imagination with breathing can be very powerful. I saw this yesterday, and one of the things we have with anxiety, when people get very anxious, you get into this state of avoiding something. So we have different colors there. So the outer color could be avoiding taking exams. I'm just going to avoid taking them. And that can affect on my career. The next arc of the color there, I think that's orange there or green, I'm colorblind. The next one could be that I don't want to go out socially to meet people. The next band, yellow band, could be that I'm going to avoid going to the gym because I don't like people looking at my body and I think I'm not as good as somebody else. The next one's a green. I might avoid talking to family and friends. The next one's a light blue. I might stop doing stuff for myself in terms of a good diet because I don't want to go to the shops and buy the good stuff. I don't want to talk to people. And as you can see, as we start avoiding more and more things in our life, we become very insular. And the more insular we are, less connectivity, the more the anxiety is going to thrive. And in COVID, when we were told to stay away from people, to be isolated and stuff, this is why the figures for mental health went through the roof in terms of new cases and worse cases. And so really, a classic way of looking at anxiety is to actually throw yourself into that and meet and connect and don't avoid. Yeah. So if you're really anxious right now, ask yourself this question: what are you avoiding? And, you know, some people say, you know, in life, if you're doing really well, you're running towards something. If you do not so good, you're running away from something. So it's an interesting concept. If you're running away from something, what are you avoiding? That's probably fueling your anxiety. I like this one. And I was saying this one to Jenny before. You could be on the bus driving from your destination to doing your exams, and you've got them coming up, and you might be actually in an exam. And somebody's saying in the bus, hey, look out the window, what's over there? And they're trying to distract you. Yeah. And so you say, it's okay, I'm driving the bus. You look at that, but I'm busy driving the bus. Then somebody else might say something else to you. Look at that image over there. What's going on? And you'll say, that's fine. I'm on my journey. So what these people are doing, they represent negative thoughts. They're trying to distract you. So recognize them, stay with them, as that acceptance commitment therapy is, but you stay in charge of the bus. Okay. You might want to slow down the bus a little bit. Okay. You might want to take a few breaths, but they're all pastures trying to distract you. And I like this one because you can imagine this in your head. Yeah. If an exam, I don't know that exam question is the wrong one. It's okay. Just someone in the bus trying to distract me. What do I know? Let's collect my senses. Let's breathe. Let's get that prefrontal cortex, the logical and rational side of our brain working rather than being hijacked on the amygdala. Some simple ones here, box breathing, so you can breathe in and hold and breathe out, and then you can actually breathe out strongly. So this one's breathe in, hold, breathe out, in again. So a little box, or you can push it out at the end there. I like this breathing hand of 5. So you breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And you'll always have a hand with you, so you can do it anywhere. And the secret is not to rush through it, to do it for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and to slow it right down. Okay. The body wants to hijack us by making us go faster, like in the bus. Yeah. Slow it down, slow the breathing down, go for 30 seconds, go for a minute, whatever it takes for you to just get back into that nice performance zone. And that oxidization in the bloodstream as well is a good process to go through. Okay. So mental chatter. For the Mental Health Foundation this week, they gave out some bits of advice, and we've got a link to that later on. But one of the things that Jenny picked up on is often when we connect things to paper, so it's up there in our heads, when we write things down on paper or in a mood journal or a diary, this is a good way of capturing that thought so we can attack it. Yeah. Or even looking at a trend. How often am I anxious? When am I anxious? Somebody said before, what day is it? What time of day? What month is it? You know, how am I feeling myself in terms of my career? So putting things down in a diary, you can work out when it's probably going to peak. Okay. And I think it's a good way of doing it on your own. But again, going back to our original point today, Sitting down with a trusted friend, if I sat down with Jenny, okay, Jenny, I'm getting this feeling all the time. What can you see that I can't see on my thoughts? Can you see something that's missing from me? Have I got a blind spot somewhere? And I think it's a fascinating thing that if you've got a good friend to be vulnerable with, who doesn't throw it back in your face later on down the next few weeks or months or years, someone you can really trust, I think it's a great way to actually challenge these thoughts. And often we find with anxiety, it's a made up position. It actually doesn't exist. We're making it up. There's a guy called Steve Peters, a psychologist, worked a lot of sports teams, cycling teams originally, then got into football and snooker. And he talked about the chimp on our shoulder that's saying you're not good enough all the time and you're nervous and you're not good enough. And this chimp comes out, especially at night times when we're sleeping or before sleep, or first thing in the morning, you wake up and it's boom, it's there for you. And he said, recognizing that, but writing your thoughts down is a good way to say, I know what's going on. It's okay.
Yeah, I
You know?
think there's a lot to that in that a bit of control and a little bit there, isn't there? And also a bit of distance from trying to kind of release it from the whirring round in your mind to be put onto paper really can help with that.
Yeah, stay with it sometimes. Recognize it, stay with it. Okay, you're boring me now. I'll see you later. I know your game. I know your trick. My job today to perform as best as I can. And some days we can't always do that, but I might go and talk to a friend, or I might just accept it for today. If I'm a bit tired sometimes, I won't challenge myself as much and hopefully get the energy. And a good example of that is when we're training, exercising. Some days, as much as you're motivated, your body won't let you. So you've got to work with it, not against it. And that's a really good tip if you're getting older. Okay, let's move it on. Doing all right for time, aren't we? So if you've had a bad event, okay, or an event that you were scared of, okay, so it might be an exam, might be meeting someone for the first time, might be coming on this session today. So you had this anxiety in your head. So let's imagine that happened and the event's gone. I want you to go through these questions now, like an open coaching way. So was this event as bad as you expected? Was it better? And I want you to go through now. I'm going to read them through to you. I want you to look at those now and go through them for me in your mind. And as you're doing that, just to give you the context again, this is something that's happened. It's already gone now, but you're very anxious about before. And now we're looking at it afterwards. So if you give the context of Jenny thinking about this presentation today afterwards, she might go through these questions and decide that, there's something she's going to do differently and better in some ways. And she's more prepared for the next one, which we've got next week on the 25th. Yeah, so it's a good process of being analytical, dealing with the anxiety, run the anxiety, taking control. You're being analytical with it. And I like that approach to it. So this might be something you can take from the recording or the slides that need be, that you might want to use as 8 points when you've had an event happen. And then what have you learned from it? And there is one piece of sage advice, is that we do learn more from our failures and our successes. So if you think it's really bad, it's gone really bad, you probably won't make that mistake or do things differently next time in a better way. We've done a few things there, a few little techniques for you, a bit of theory around the chemicals and one or two tips about this. Has any of these negative mental chatter scored, has it reduced? This one was 8 or 9 or 10. Has it gone down to 6, 7 or 8? Does you want to be honest and admit that, or is it just too early to say? We've got 167 people online, so maybe somebody's gone down a little bit.
Down
Just
a bit.
Yeah. And you've got some resources and tools. Again, with most resources and tools and strategies, it's all about practice, getting the right person to share it with. But, even in a short period of time, let's say 15 minutes there, it can easily deflate in a good way. Okay. So I think when anything's finished, how am I going to pick up the pieces again? And that's an interesting part to those last few questions. Some other factors that I think are important for dealing with anxiety. It's about knowing who you are, your identity, and where you belong within a workforce, within a family, with some friendships, where you are in your life in a linear way. And I think if we know who we are, we've got some belonging and attachments, I think this gives us the basis to challenge anxiety. Often I used to work with a lot of young children who were struggling with anxiety, and the smallest thing could upset them. because they had a very rocky road growing up, and they didn't have that connection and belonging and support systems in place that maybe a lot of us have, and we don't really take them. We take them for granted sometimes, and we shouldn't do. So having that grounding in your life is very important. It helps us deal with anxiety better. When I've got strong family around me who are being empathetic and understand me when I'm ill, it makes the journey of recovery so much more possible and feasible and tangible. When we don't have that in place, and I don't know if you experience this, but as much as the NHS is really good, if you're going in there and you're facing delays and you're not getting a diagnosis, and then people aren't relating to you or understanding you, and the opposite of that is that you then think you put on this image on that you're not really ill because they can't diagnose it. You can lose a lot of your self-esteem, which drives then the anxiety. Often people, and this could be a genetic thing, that people narrate the world too negatively, maybe from the parents, their upbringing. So looking for problems rather than solutions. And they're looking for somebody's going to take something off me rather than somebody's going to give me something. So be careful that we don't narrate the world in a very negative way. There are lots of things in the world that aren't nice. There's a lot of things that are really good that sometimes aren't promoted and seen. A great tip is to plan what's ahead of you. Just play what's in front of you that day ahead, this next hour. Don't go into catastrophize mode. If I don't do this, I won't get that. And where's my life going to go? And then just play what's ahead of you today, the next hour. Always look for the positives first. Yeah. So that's not gone as well as I thought, but there's some positives somewhere. And just completing that loop, try and get some supportive influences. You don't need hundreds of friends. You need 2 or 3 people who have got your back and you can trust. And that's a really good backstop for dealing with anxiety half the time. And if we need to go to professional services, then we will do at some point. I wouldn't rule that out whatsoever. Over to you, Jenny.
Yeah, I'll talk about this in a minute, but just going to pick up some of the chat sidebars that we've been having. So a lot of people are talking about relating to comments you've just made there, Ross, how the news can make us feel more anxious. We're living through a period of reading about wars, economic crisis, etc. So it's a really anxious creating time, isn't it? Anxiety creating time. We've also been talking about other themes of help, to-do lists or not to-do lists. We've been looking at people talking about meditation and songs that have helped them. So what I'm just highlighting here is the benefit of coming to these sessions and the community conversation that is happening at the same time. Some really positive, helpful suggestions from people. So thank you everyone for joining us and doing that. Other sources of support are at Kaplan. There are a multitude of them. So there's the Learning My Way microsite that apprentices are using. We've got lots of wellbeing content on the website that Paul Wise has been curating for us recently. So do have a look at the Kaplan website. And of course, the safeguarding team is there if you need it, the safeguarding@kaplan.co.uk email address. Ross and I run these sessions. If you haven't joined us before, do come back. We typically do one a month, but we're running an extra one this month because we had a date change for a previous one. So we're together on the 25th of May, looking at developing hope and belief. So if you've had a setback, such as an exam or a lack of confidence or a lack of motivation, come along to that one. And we will then run the series for the rest of the year. And what's important is that you tell us what you need from these sessions, because Ross and I plan them out depending on the feedback that you give us. So I'm just going to put the feedback form. So if you could all take a minute now to complete that, if you've got access to Google Forms, that's great. And give us your feedback of what you found helpful, what you would like in future sessions, and also if 1 o'clock would be a better start time than 12:30, let me know. So somebody's asked Ross how they get notified of the webinars. So they go on to the Kaplan Eventbrite page. We put them there. I'll put the chat link in a second. And they also get
You're
on
just
the
breaking up a bit, Jenny.
Kaplan.
Just repeat the
Sorry,
last bit, Jenny. Just
yeah,
breaking up a little bit.
the notification for the webinars goes on the Kaplan Eventbrite page and also on our My Kaplan news alerts, so you can access them there. Ross, whilst I find the link for that to put in the chat, do you want to take questions now?
Yeah, there's some. Well, just let me just a couple of things then, Jen. The Mental Health Foundation. This is the week that they organised this. They've got some sort of generic links there to mindfulness exercise, cost of living, nature diet, helpline services. So again, if you can't pick it up now, great. If you can't, if you can, great. If you can't, give me an email and I can sort it out for you afterwards as well. Anything you want to ask then about what we've done today? I'm going to take that down. So I want to see people's, I don't know if it's possible to see people's faces, but I like to see people if I can. Any questions come in there that people want to ask me something particularly that's bugging them? Jenny's put that Eventbrite for you.
So yeah, we've got a question about being overwhelmed, and you imagining that bus crowded of anxiety, and any other tips to kind of cope with overwhelm?
Yeah, my first thought when I get anxious, I think why, and I very quickly think why. Does it feel I'm not good at this? Is it because I'm tired? Is it because something's happened recently that's wobbled me a little bit? So I just think about, I take the temperature of where Ross is at the moment. Okay. And I go back to that Virgin broadband thing I did before. I was getting a bit frustrated with it, that I just want to speak to you on the phone and arrange a deal for the next six months or 12 months. And I couldn't do that. So that was driving me. My impatience was driving me. And the more I thought about it, the more I was getting, I won't say anxious, but more frustrated, irritated, and probably then anxious. So I decided to see it through for 30 minutes. And I give myself that time, not run away from the problem. I stayed with it for 30 minutes. Then I eventually put the link down and I thought, I'll just text my friend of mine who'll come round tonight and we'll do it together. And I think it's not a weakness doing that. And I think sometimes when we're anxious, you just need to bounce it off somebody else, because we can get so much into it that we can't see the truth. And this is where human beings are meant to mix, they're meant to be connected. If you stay too long in your own, you'll create an image of the world that's not the right image. So often when I feel a bit struggling with that, I just had a new knee recently and I get down with the pain and I speak to a friend of mine, Nick, and Nick always gives me something positive back. He said, you're probably better than last week. You'll listen to me, but he'll say, well, if we can't do it this way, it's not better. We'll go back to the doctors. We'll do something with it. And he's just taking it, excuse the pun, in his stride. And I think that's something, getting those right people around you who are not going to add fire to the flames, who are going to look at it logically and rationally and get on with it. And I think that's one of the biggest things I can say about anxiety. Getting the right people around you who won't trip you up, are there to support you. And I can't say I've got that many people who do that, but it's something I'm working towards.
I've got two questions I'd like us to look at. One is, what if it's something that's really worrying you and is causing anxiety, but is actually beyond your own control? And the second one is around getting, feeling anxious around failure, and any tips to cope with that.
Okay. The first one then, Stephen Covey talks about the 7 habits of highly effective people. And he said, the premise here is this: don't worry about the things you can't control. I can't control the weather. Okay. And so why should I worry about it too much? Prepare myself, wear the right clothes or stay indoors, put the heating on. I can't control it. But if you can then influence something, then that's important. So I think the first thing is understand what is beyond your remit. Nobody's Superman or Superwoman. And I think that's very important to remember that straight away. But there might be something you can influence. What little things can we do to help us? And I think that's really important with anxiety. What little things can I do for myself without bending over and going, I can't do it, I'm useless, I'm a failure. What things can I take control of myself? So that's always something, that I'm always thinking about. Your second question, how do you deal with failure? If you want to be a bit simplistic about this, fail, first attempt in learning, we learn more from our failures than our successes. So it could be not your fault you fail something, it could be your fault you fail something, but at the end of the day, you fail something. So you've got to gather yourself up and understand why. This analytical head that goes on top of this on top of anxiety to analyze, why is it that I failed something? Was I not prepared? Did I get the wrong questions? Did I rush things? as my development not ready for it yet, like passing the driving test. Sometimes we just need some more lessons and a bit more experience to pass that driving test. And it's again about not beating yourself up. There's always something cleverer, better, sharper, faster than you in the world, but it's about your look at the world and what you need to do to improve, because this ability to improve, to grow and to develop, to enhance ourselves and then to help other people is what life's about. So, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think failure is something you've got to keep with and make some plans and analyze it and get the supports and then be patient. It will happen.
Yeah, good advice there, Ross. We've got time for a couple of others. I'm going to just take a few from the chat and the Q&A. One around any specific tips on how to be productive or get back to being productive when the feel of building anxiety can be all consuming.
Yeah, it's knowing when you work best in a day. I'm a morning person. I don't know if you're the morning or afternoon person. I think you mentioned last time you're more of a late afternoon person. Is that right, Jenny, or not?
Yes, I am.
There you go. I
Not a
remember
morning
that.
person.
No. So you got to know when you work best. You know what prompts you to work best. So a bit of exercise in the morning for me always helps me a lot. Having some good, clean food in the morning helps me a lot. Okay. Having some rewards at the end of the day helps me a lot. And not expecting too much of me sometimes. And let me be more creative helps me really produce something. So I think it's knowing yourself quite well and hanging around with people who are going to support that good Ross, rather than people going to take the bad Ross and put it more into you. So it's getting those right environments. And again, little things like sleep, diet, exercise are really important to our emotional mindset. There's an article last week about fried foods can make us quite depressed. I know I've stopped drinking alcohol for the last 5 years. That gives me a more even keel on things. So there could be some behaviors and mannerisms that you're doing that we know scientifically aren't good for us. And that's something you can look at in terms of that mood, which could make you more vulnerable to anxiety.
Great, thank you. I'm going to take another one. It's related to, probably somebody in an apprenticeship environment who is doing several exams or assessments in a short space of time. And what happens when the first one doesn't go very well, but you've got more to come? How do you reset the brain?
Yeah, I talked a couple of weeks ago, well, maybe a month ago, about Adam Peaty in Brazilian Olympics, and he won the I think the 50 meters sprint in the breaststroke. But what the psychologist did, he said, let's plan it not to go fantastic. Let's plan for problems. So when it happens, where it's going to happen here, expect it. Expect it when it happens, a problem. And what happened, then he lost his kit. And he had to walk around the Olympic Village in his trunks all the time, where people thought that's all right, but not going for dinner at night and stuff. It was only happened for about 12 hours, but it was uncomfortable for him. Couldn't see that happening, but he accepted it. So sometimes you've got to accept when something's not quite right. How can I change it? How can I make it better once it's happened, rather than going, I'm useless, I'm a failure, I'll never do this again. So I think expect the unexpected, be able to deal with it in a way that's professional, that's contrived in the right way, that's strategic and analytical, is a good way of dealing with something. There are no shortcuts or quick fixes here, but life will throw curveballs at you, and you've got to maybe decide which ones to hit or not, or to duck, or to change the game eventually.
I've got quite thank you so much, everyone. I've got quite a deep one here, and I know it might be upsetting, but it probably affects a lot of people. As somebody who's recently lost a member of their family, and they're now getting feelings of anxiety about loss and bereavement.
Yeah, bereavement. And I went through it 11 years ago. My father died, and it took me about 3 years to recognize it was the bereavement. And I had to do that through a counselor. So I sought professional support. It's very subtle how grief can affect you. And there was a theory in the 1960s, the Kubler-Ross change curve, to deal with grief. And it sort of went up and down like in a U shape. And it says at the start, when people die, we deny it. We get frustrated, we get angry, we can get depressed. And then we can go backwards and forwards on this angry, depression, denial, frustration. At some point, we might transfer into the other side of this U shape, where we're going to this bit more acceptance. Can we play with this in the new world? Are things different? Yes. Can I take advantage of this somehow? Can I create a legacy for somebody? Can I then move my life and make them proud for me? So this U shape is these emotions that go with this, and it's not linear. You don't spend so many months at one stage and go to the next one, and you eventually get out of it. So it affects people in different ways. Accept that. It could be nothing might not be the same again, but there could be opportunities that you didn't know exist, but they will exist if you keep with that process. It will change.
I think that might be the end of our time, Ross. It will change. It's been a really, really brilliant session. I said in the chat, everybody has contributed and enhanced this from the things and suggestions you've made. So thank you for all being vulnerable and sharing with us. It's been a really good community people today. Look forward to seeing you with us next in May on the 25th, if you can join us then, or at any of the future sessions. And Ross, a pleasure as always to speak to you. And I'll stop the recording now. Ross and I will stay on the call for a few minutes if anyone's got some questions that we haven't been able to address. And don't forget, wear it green tomorrow to shine a light on dealing with anxiety and Mental Health Awareness Week. Thanks all for joining us.